With the world continuing to remain in a state of geopolitical flux and tensions increasingly escalating over Russia's invasion over Ukraine, we have kamikaze drones that have been purchased from Iran and now being used to cripple Ukraine's electricity infrastructure and freeze the Ukrainian people as a dull and dark winter looms. Well, joining us as usual is our North American and European correspondent, Michael A. Chabon, to discuss not only the kamikaze drones, but building the next narco state. And then we're going to swing on to the upcoming November 8 primaries and what Americans are doing and whether they can actually trust the political system. Welcome, Michael.
Hi, Michael. It's never a thought that I would have considered talking about kamikaze drones in Europe, but that's really what is happening here. In Ukraine, they're releasing, the Russians are releasing what one would explain as swarms of drones. Swarms meaning volleys of 20 or 30 at a time. And these multiple volleys are basically overwhelming the ground defenses and makes it very hard to destroy all of them because the complete swarm comes all at once. You may be able to shoot down half of them or a third of them, but still some get through. You can't get all of them. Hence, it's like a science fiction novel. We've seen this in science fiction and in animation, but this is really happening. It's led to believe that these drones have been purchased from Iran. Now, Iran, of course, discounts it and says they're not doing it. But when you have the name, the Hashad drones, which is a drone 136, it's an autonomous drone. Henceforth, it's called the kamikaze because it doesn't have a pilot. It's a push prop type of drone. But Michael, it costs $20,000 US, has a range of 2,500 kilometers, 2,500 kilometers, and can travel at a speed of 185 kilometers an hour. Imagine 30 of those coming into an area. Now, at $20,000 a drone compared to the missiles that Russia was previously launching at $1 million each from their submarines and from some of their land-based things, it's a completely different set of rules. We are seeing something that is unprecedented and never seen before. And the unfortunate reality is that currently 30% of the Ukraine's electrical facilities are either damaged or completely destroyed. They're exploding everything. Kyiv now is in dark and it could be in cold. And I mean, with the winter looming, and remember, Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2 is not working, so there's no gas coming to them. They're starting to, in Germany, they're getting coal plants back up and going. I mean, Europe and the United States will have to step up to this and will have to start to protect this because the problem is it's escalating to a point of craziness.
That's an interesting point. How close do you think we are of being dragged in to World War III because of this, Michael?
Well, interesting you say World War III. I was thinking about this the other day. This tactic of sending these Hashad drones, do you remember back in World War II when Hitler was getting really desperate, he was sending the buzz bombs over to Britain, right? Now, these were military buzz bombs that made a noise. And when they stopped buzzing, you knew that it was going to explode because it stopped, the propeller stopped. They would Hitler sent those buzz bombs over to England to cripple Britain's will to fight and to try to obviously harm British soil. But they weren't exact. He aimed them at London, he aimed them over there. There was no exacting. The difference here is that these Hashad drones at 2,500 kilometers in distance and 185 miles an hour, these are satellite guided things. This is something completely different. So it brings us to the point, and relative to your question, how close are we marching to World War III? And what could that flashpoint be that's going to create that conflict? Will the Ukraine send drones that they've got from the United States and Europe and Israel and all these other folks? Because they're saying, are they going to send drones then to Russia and attack their infrastructure? What is Russia going to do to retaliate? Are they going to use a small nuclear bomb to try and do that? If that happens, I tell you, Michael, from the information of some of the contacts that I have in the United States, in the event that there's any type of nuclear activity whatsoever, the United States will basically obliterate every single Russian installation that is located in the Ukraine. And a combined force in the world will basically take out every piece of infrastructure in Russia and cripple the country to their knees. Because if you launch a nuclear bomb in Europe, That's not just going against a non-NATO state. That is European soil, and that will change the whole situation. So we're at a very critical point, and it's very, you say scary. I mean, you guys are in Australia, I'm in Canada. But now distance doesn't mean anything because these things can travel thousands and thousands of kilometers. And what happens if that actually happens and they disable the infrastructure? Does that mean Putin's going to press the red button because he doesn't care? Are we really that close? I don't know.
It's terrifying. And you mentioned the noise of the old buzz bombs. I've heard reporting from people on the ground in Ukraine saying these drones are very noisy, and they're saying now that they're also being used as a terrorizing tactic as well, just that noise where everyone has to take cover, because I'm sure they could make them silent, but the noise adds an extra dimension of terror to those on the ground and makes them feel even more at risk, I'd say.
Well, remember the Luftwaffe with the Messerschmitts? It was the whole thing when the Messerschmitt did a dive, it had that noise. You know, we used to make that noise as a kid when we were playing, but that was part of the fear factor. But imagine 30 of these triangular things flying in formation and knowing that each and every one of them carries something that will explode, and you have no electricity, you have no gas, and it's just getting worse. The poor Ukrainian people. I mean, it's just terrible. It's absolutely terrible. I hope the world never, never, never excuses Russia for this, ever. This is terrible. This is absolutely terrible.
All right, let's move on to the next segment, Michael. Building the next narco state. You've got some just mind-boggling amounts of money that are happening in this.
Well, this is part of what the problem that America is dealing with. They have an open border. There are billions of dollars of combined profit that are going to the cartels for all these illegal immigrants and for the drugs that are going on in Mexico. If you are an average Mexican and you want to get over the border, we don't want to you see them wading across the water there and going through extreme danger. It's $7,000 American. That's what it costs. If you were ever charged or ever were involved with the police or any type of border patrol, etc., in the United States, and you cannot be detained, or you have to be, as they call them, gotaways in the States, it's $10,000. If you're from Latin America, it's $20,000. If you're from Europe, it can be upwards of $30,000 to $40,000 per person. And it's a deadly risk. I mean, just in June this year, there was, they transport them in large tractor trailers and all kinds of horrendous ways that once they come across the border. 53 people were packed in a tractor trailer and they suffocated to death. And that's just one small portion. I mean, if you want to look at the real facts and figures here, in 2018, there was $500 million that went to Mexico for all the illegal immigration. To date, where we are here, coming up to November 2022, it is $3 billion this year alone that's gone to. $3 billion. I mean, there are countries that don't have a GDP of that, for God's sakes.
Yep.
And when you talk about the drugs, they're saying there's $30 billion that has gone to Mexico in illegal drugs. So how does America fight this? 75,000 Americans died of fentanyl. And these gangs now are starting to take over cities. They're militarized. They have guns. They have jeeps. They have armaments. They're starting to challenge the local government and politicians. In elections, to deter certain politicians, they were throwing severed heads at debates. I mean, Andre Manuel Lopez Obrador is the president of Mexico. He was elected in 2018. He's going to have a civil war there because the gangs and the cartels have too much money. And not only do you have to worry about the government, think about the gangs fighting amongst themselves for control of areas. I mean, this is another powder keg that is just, and America has open borders. Come on in. I mean, they're putting them in tent camps in New York from the buses that are sending the illegal immigrants up from Texas because they're fed up. I mean, what is going on? What are they thinking?
And it's a terrible state to be in, because as long as they think there's a chance of getting in, it encourages these, I'll call them ratbag people smugglers who have no morals, no ethics, no concern for human life, to let these people risk their lives. And the tragedy in the trailer of those 58 people suffocating to death. What a horrible way to go. So there's one thing for being immigration friendly, but it's another thing to not set up a border that just says, if you try to come here, you won't get in. So don't try. Don't put your life at risk. It's not anti-immigrant. It's pro-life, if anything. Don't die trying to get in because you won't get in.
Well, that's the American moral struggle. America was based on the Statue of Liberty. We welcome your poor, you're hungry, and you're starving. Come to this land and make a new home. That was like 100 years ago, for God's sakes. I mean, that's a completely different situation. And the moral challenge that Americans have is they are a nation of charity. Anytime that there's been strife or anything, think of Haiti with the hospital ships and all that. Americans are the first ones to fund aid and to help people from anywhere around the world, earthquakes, strife, everything. The problem is that this is a different situation. A lot of these people are leaving because they have gang problems, because they have financial problems. That is unfortunate, but there's a certain process that you have to go through to be able to be admitted to another country, which is of a completely different level of living. It costs more. You feel heartfelt. You can't blame them, as you said, but you can't just let them in. It doesn't work like that. And as a result, they have manufactured the strength in the cartels.
Yeah. Now, November 8th, seismic decision here for Americans could leave Biden as a lame duck president for the last couple of years of his presidency. Won't be able to get much done. How can we trust the polls this time, Michael?
You're absolutely correct, Michael. Lame duck is where it is. I mean, the Republicans are focusing on inflation, on spending, the economy, the law and order, because the crime statistics have been horrible. Democratic governors and Democratic states who said, oh, we don't like the look of the statistics of the people who are put in jail. It looks like we're racist and systemically racist. So we've got to eliminate the cash bail law. So regardless what you're charged with, regardless what you do, we're not going to make you put up bail because, well, you won't be able to afford it. So we're discriminating against you because a large proportion of those people are people of color. And unfortunately, the crime statistics have gone up and been terrible. And then you talk about the open border and gasoline. I mean, the United States has to open the spigots. That's what the Republicans want them to do. So what does Biden do? He depletes the petroleum reserves to try and reduce the prices, but it doesn't work. Interest rates are going up. I mean, it's all about the domestic economy, which is the priority in crime. And Bloomberg actually reported that it's 100% chance that there is going to be a recession, where the variable happens is how long and when is it really going to take effect. The Democrats on the other side, they're talking about abortion, women's rights. They're talking about gas prices going down. I mean, they're smoking the drapes. They're talking about this Green New Deal and doing their sacrifice. Biden said the American economy is strong. I mean, even CNN starts putting graphics up that he said the guy's out of line. And then he's sitting there eating his ice cream like a good old grandpa, and he says, I'm more worried about the world. I mean, he's just not connecting. It's going to be a catastrophe, but this is part of what the debate is all about, the Republicans against the Democrats. It's terrible.
Now, while we're talking the war in Ukraine, does this bode well for China with Taiwan? Should we become fully involved or more involved than what we already are as the world? Would this signal the chance for Taiwan to use it as for China to use it as their opportunity to move on Taiwan, do you think?
America will be vulnerable. America's vulnerable right now. Imagine America with a lame duck president. So basically, the House and the Senate is controlled by Republicans who want to close the border, open the spigots, start producing oil, harden police enforcements in cities that have been rampant with crimes, put people in jail, kick all the people who are living on the side of the streets and open defecating and doing all that. They want to harden and create a city that is safe. No one wants to go to New York. No one wants to go to New Orleans. That's what the Republicans want to do. The Democrats don't want to do that. The only recourse that Biden has then is as a presidential veto. How does that bode when China decides that they're going to do war games again, which they did just a little while ago to a huge extent, and then they invade Taiwan. Is America going to have the nuts to stand up and say, all together, all for one for all? This is very trying time. I mean, we've touched on several topics here that all involve people who are trying to push their will over someone else. Taiwan, Russia, the narco cartels. These are all forces that are illegal, go against everything that we believe that is right, and are using force and death and military to get it across. I don't know if people really realize the state that the world is in, and to have America in a lame duck president, and with all a gracious respect to President Biden, the man isn't the most forceful, determined man that you would want to be heading, the representative of the free world. And I don't know, Michael. I don't know. I mean, you live on an island, and you are able to look upon as it goes. You're affected by things that go on. We in Canada, for all intents and purposes, live in an island, except we're connected. I mean, the longest undefended border in the world. But when America sneezes, Canada catches a cold. And when America makes a move, it affects the rest of the world. So this is going to be very trying times. I think we all have to be very vigilant, and we all have to speak up and be honest with what we're feeling and say what's right. And don't be afraid to say what's right, because that kind of a situation is going to put us all in dire straits. I hope none of this all comes true, and that it's all, flatulence, and that everything can work itself out. But I dare say there's going to be some challenges in the next couple of months. Come February, when it's minus, oh my God, and people are starving and there's no gas, and they're starting to burn trees in parks and take buildings down to try and heat themselves, that's going to be desperate times. And that's not what you want to be put in.
Michael, I've noticed over the years, though, when America goes to war or goes to defend, the partisan nature of American politics seems to dissipate something. Do you think they would unite behind Biden should this happen, and drop some of the political point scoring and just go, we've got to be as one? Or is he that on the nose that he wouldn't get the support?
No, I think Americans will come together. Americans realize that they are Americans first, and they are Republicans and Democrats second. In a scenario which is going to challenge their livelihood and their countrymen, and something that's going to be so morally imprehensible, they will come together and put politics aside. But America's at a very tough crossroads. There's never been so divided. There's never been so much dissent between the aisles that they're not working together. But I have 100% faith in America's ability to pull the big pants on, as they would say, and do that, regardless of their political affiliation. America still will do what is right. But it is that pause, and it is the time that's leading up, which is being more dangerous, because you're allowing the other side to plan and do. Who's to know that there isn't already a cyber attack that will take place at the same time and put all communications down? All these little things that excuse me, that is like a bubbling cauldron, to use a Halloween phrase. We have to be vigilant. And again, I can't impress upon the fact that each and every one of us has to say what's right and be true to ourselves.
Yep. Now, earlier we mentioned the polls, and given your experience and your proximity to it, we saw the 2016 polls just so far off the mark. Were the bookies on track in 2016, and are the bookies, is their sentiment matching the current polling? Who do we go with here? I seem to think the bookies have a better handle on things, because it kind of costs them money.
We have to understand the media landscape in the United States. They're predominantly liberal. Other than Fox and Newsmax and Online America, there's predominant saturation of a more liberal, sanitized, democratic perspective, which is presented to the general public, including many of the newspapers. The difference here, though, is we talked about in one of our last sessions about Tulsi Gabbard leaving the Democratic Party with such a passionate speech. You heard that everywhere, except many of the liberal media outlets, of why she was leaving and the reason why. And now, interestingly enough, like in Wisconsin, Philadelphia, Florida, Georgia, you have all these debates that are going on for Senate races. Dr. Oz, who had a former famous television show, he's going up against John Fetterman, the Democrat. They're talking about that. Marco Rubio, he's going after his Senate seat, and his debate was on television. They're talking about Herschel Walker, a former NFL football player, is going against Raphael Warnock, who won Georgia in the last time. So American voters are now making themselves more aware. October surprise is the time they're now all looking at what it is that's happening. There's more debate going on. I still believe there's some filtration, but I think Americans are seeing pretty clear when you have to make a decision, are you going to go and put groceries in, or are you going to put $5 of gas in the car? Because it's in California, in some places, it's $7 a gallon. And this is a country that has enough oil, more oil than Saudi Arabia, to be self-sufficient. No one says that pushing to electric cars and trying to eliminate fossil fuels is not the right path. But you can't just shut everything off and say, that's it, folks, no more engines. That's it. It just doesn't work that way. We don't have the battery capacity. We don't have the electrical capacity. We don't have the charging capacity. You have to step it up. But unfortunately, by doing that, I think the Democrats have put the American economy in peril at a very inopportune time. And the chickens are coming back to roost. And my prediction is that the Republicans will control the House and they will control the Senate. And Joe Biden will be a lame duck. And basically, it's going to be a ship show. I'll say it that way, but I think we all know what I'm trying to say. But that's what it's going to be. And the media it's going to be a feeding frenzy of pigeons that haven't eaten for 4 days, and someone just spread some seed on the ground.
Yeah. And speaking about the debates, the Informer's own American correspondent, Katie Dixon, was the moderator on one of the debates. So by default, the Informer is controlling American politics. We'll take that.
Well, hats off to you, Informer, because it always gives an interesting perspective and an opportunity. I encourage everybody to go through some of the reporters and some of the pieces. And Michael, I got to say this: we never practice; we just have it as a go, as they say. You and I always have a great discussion, and I always appreciate the opportunity that the Informer affords myself and other people like myself to be able to tell people where we're coming from and give a little bit of a different perspective at times, because I think it's a little filtered. So hats off to the Informer on that one for sure.
Thanks so much, Michael. I'll give you another tip. At the moment, the Australian dollar, I don't think, has ever been lower against the American dollar. So get yourself some of those dollars from down south. Come and visit us.
That would love to. Thank you, Michael.
All right, Michael. See you next week.
Take care.